All right, let's start as we always do by saying the blessing for study together. So I'm going to share my screen, and if you would like to do so, I would invite you to unmute yourself at this time so that we can say this blessing together. Baruch atah Adonai
Adonai,
Eloheinu melech
Eloheinu melech haolam,
asher
asher
kidshanu
kitshanu
b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu
v'tzivanu
la'asok
la'asok
b'divrei Torah.
Torah.
Blessed is the Eternal, whose mitzvot, whose commandments bring holiness into our lives, and who commands us to immerse, to engage in words of study. The blessing that we've just said indicates a deeply held Jewish idea that study is a sacred act. Study is an act of connection with the divine, connection with our own better selves, connection with our capacity for tikkun, for repair, and with our capacity for hope, for tikva, which is, of course, why we're here. I want to do something a little different today. I've chosen, as you all know, the usual mode of study here is that we pick a Jewish text and we look for hope in that Jewish text. Well, I picked a text today that is not a Jewish text. I want to thank Vicky, who's here with us today, for sharing this poem with me that I'm about to share with you. It's not a Jewish text in that it was not written by someone Jewish, but I think it is a sacred text. And as we go through, one of the things that I want to do is to invite us to connect things that this poet, this author is saying about hope with Jewish ideas that might come up for us. So let me share my screen here. This is called Hope is a Form of Resistance by Dave Joseph Jr. Dave Joseph Jr., as you can see here, is a writer, a poet, and a storyteller. And what it doesn't say in his bio here is that he's actually also a pastor, a minister. He says, exploring faith, identity, and the quiet places where God still speaks. So this poem is called Hope is a Form of Resistance. And I'm going to read the whole thing. It's a couple of pages long here. And then I want to give us a chance to respond to this poem. What does it bring up for you? How does it feel? What does it make you think about or feel as you're reading it? And then we're going to break it down a little bit and kind of go a paragraph or two at a time and see what it brings up for us. And I figure that sounds like about half an hour's worth of conversation. So let's begin. I'll read for us. He writes, Hope is not passive. It does not whisper only when the storm subsides. It roars in the middle of the flood, grips the broken hand and says, hold on. Hope is not a wish. It is a weapon. Hope is a form of resistance. It walks into a room where futures have been stolen and plants a seed anyway. It speaks in courtrooms where silence is expected and sings in classrooms where books have forgotten our names. Hope wears work boots, not wings. It is built in soup kitchens, in protest lines, in pews where tired saints still raise holy hands for justice not yet seen. Hope stands when grief says sit. It rises when oppression says kneel. It keeps marching when the road has been paved with disappointment. There are names we remember because hope kept them alive. Songs that survived because somebody believed that the melody mattered. Movements that breathed because a mother refused to let her child grow up believing nothing could change. Hope resists, not because it is blind, but because it sees too much to give up. It remembers the lynching tree and still dares to hang lights in its branches. It hears the verdict and still votes. It buries its dead and still builds. Hope is not naive. It knows the weight of history, but carries it anyway. It is not quiet. It's the drumbeat beneath the chant, the tremble in the voice that still says yes when the world has said no. So we carry hope like fire in our chests. We pass it like torches down crowded streets and family tables. We protect it not because it is fragile, but because it is sacred. And in the days when the sky grows heavy, when the voice feels small, and the world seems unmoved, remember, hope is not for the untested. Hope is for the bold. Hope is how we resist without becoming what we resist. Hope is how we rise, how we remember, how we rebuild, how we remember that we are still here, not by accident, but by audacity, because hope, true hope, will always be the beginning of freedom. Let's give that a second to sink in. Now, I know you don't have the entire poem in front of you, but I just want to give us a chance to respond. So if you can either put in the chat, or if you'd like to raise your hand and share, just a few words about what's on your mind right now. What does this make you think about? How does it make you feel? Let's just share what we've got. Giving people a moment to type. Is anybody typing? A couple of people. All right, I see David says it made you think of Hatikva. Good, I want to know more about that in a few minutes. Tears, encouraged but overwhelmed. The other David says there were many parts that resonated with me as well. Yvonne, will you share with us what's on
Oh,
your mind?
yeah, no, I mean, my family's history is so impregnated in me because they were Holocaust survivors, my parents and my grandparents, that me growing up with their stories and with their past experiences, immediately, the poem took me there. Not as resistance, I wouldn't put that word, but as a ways of leading the way towards what their life was afterwards.
Thank you. That's beautiful. So some of you put really interesting connections in the chat that some of which I had as well. The audacity of hope, because I mean, you don't have it in front of you anymore, but in the last paragraph, he says we are still here not by accident, but by audacity. Right? There is an audacity to believe that you can have hope and I mean, this poem is obviously coming out of an African American experience, as you know, as that is the world of the author. And so, Obama might connect to that as well. And the idea that you can hope that the world can be different, even when the world feels so downtrodden. There is an audacity to that. David W., who said it made you think of Hatikva. I don't know if you're able to unmute. Any chance you want to, if you even remember, if you can tell us what was it about this poem that made you think of Hatikva?
I think, I don't know, it was just more like some of the final words in in what you were saying. And now, of course, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I don't know. I remember seeing like some of the movies about I guess, I don't know if people are familiar with them. There was the movie Exodus, there was a movie Cast a Giant Shadow, and it just brought me back to some of those cinematic images of, Holocaust survivors sort of landing on a boat in Israel, and just like what, the look on their faces. And it just made me think of that.
Nice. Yeah, the final words, which we'll come back to in a minute, as we're going to look through the poem sort of a paragraph at a time. The final words of the poem are that hope is always the beginning of freedom. So I can see how that could, Hatikva, the words of Hatikva do include both hope and freedom, right? Our 2,000-year hope to be a free people in Zion and Jerusalem. So let's go back. Thank you all for these beautiful comments. And I hope you share. I hope this was moving to you as well. I just found this poem so powerful. Let's go back, because as I was going through, I found what I thought were some really interesting Jewish connections. And so I just want to read it again and share the connections I found. And if you'd like to comment on that, please raise your hand electronically so that I can see you, or just wave at me like this. That way I'll know that you want to speak. I would love to hear your thoughts on how this is a Jewish poem, even though it's not a Jewish poem, if you know what I mean. So in the first paragraph, he says, hope is not passive. It does not whisper. Only when the storm subsides. It roars in the middle of the flood. Now, I'm a rabbi, so when I hear the word flood, I obviously go back to Noah and the ark. And it made me think of the idea that the Noah and the ark story is in many ways a story of hope and a story of audacious hope. Months ago, we studied together with Rabbi Stephanie Crawley, at that time of Washington, D.C., now newly of downtown Toronto, one of my new neighbors here in Toronto. And she pointed out to us a really interesting glimmer, ray, literally, of hope in the story of Noah, which is that when Noah is told to build an ark, he's told to make an opening for daylight in the ark. In other words, put a window in the ark is what God says to Noah. And I remember Rabbi Crawley teaching us, how is putting a window in an ark an act of hope? And the reason is that from the very beginning of the flood story, before the flood even comes, before Noah imagines that the world is about to be flooded, he's already built in the means of his redemption. Because what happens at the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made and sent out the raven. The raven, and of course later really the dove, that's the way that we know that the flood has ended. So when Noah goes to build his ark, he builds into it the means of the redemption that will come later. He builds into it the capacity to be redeemed from the flood that is about to come. And that takes incredible, audacious hope, to believe that the flood you're in the middle of will come to an end, even when you are in the middle of it. And so I like the idea that hope roars in the middle of the flood. It's easy to have hope when things are done, right? It's hard to have hope. Real hope is what happens when you are in the middle of the flood. I just want to look at some of the comments in the chat. Deborah says, perhaps hope can be seen as an attitude of resistance because it gives us an option/vision other than accepting whatever it is that is happening that doesn't feel right. Yes, I love that. And I think in some ways that's what Noah's doing here, right? Build in a window because you believe that the current situation doesn't always have to be the situation. You believe that the way things are not always the way that things will be. By the way, Judaism, I don't want to say Judaism invented that idea, but Judaism revolves in many ways around that idea. The whole concept of Messiah, the whole concept of Messianic age, the idea that the world will be redeemed, that exile will come to an end. These are the windows that have been built into Judaism from the very beginning. I'll just pause for a minute. Thoughts, comments, questions, anything this is bringing up for you? Quiet group today. So let's go on. He continues, hope is a form of resistance. It walks into a room where futures have been stolen and plants a seed anyway. I see Susan's hand up. Go ahead, Susan. Susan, you're on mute there. There you go.
Thank you. I had to leave and come back.
Oh, Susan, there are two of you. We'll need you to end one of your two streams so that we can hear, because you're getting we're getting an echo of you.
Oh no. All right.
All right, we're gonna come back to Susan once she's got her technical stuff figured out. So coming back to this idea, planting a seed.
How is that? No, never mind. Never mind.
All right, hopefully we'll get Susan back soon. I am filled with hope that we will get Susan back soon. Okay, planting a seed. It walks into a room where futures have been stolen and planted a seed anyway. Why or how is planting a seed an act of hope? Anybody want to comment on that? What does planting a seed have to do with hope? I see Aviva and Yehuda unmuted. Go ahead, Aviva.
That is the ultimate sign of hope, in the same way that having children is that same sign of hope. That, you know, at best it takes 9 months to produce a child, and at best it takes 5 to 7 years to produce fruit from a tree, or weeks or months a seed for a vegetable. And that is the ultimate, to me, the ultimate sign of hope is planting and having children. And one of the things that actually makes me worry in my children's generation is how many of them have actually made a decision not to have children. I think that is a profound sign of of societal lack of hope.
Hmm. Yeah, and my children as well, I've seen that, and some of that relates to climate change, right? The worry about what the world will be like.
Yeah.
Yes, planting a seed, and as any of you who are gardeners know, or maybe parents, I don't know, planting a seed. I see you, Yehuda, you're next. Planting a
We
seed
are
is
gardeners.
Oh, you're a gardener. Okay, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, we have grown our own food for 50 years.
Oh, wow, I'm impressed. I'm a gardener as well, and so I know that some years the tomatoes do better than other years, right? You always hope at the beginning of that season about how your garden will do, but you never know. We plant seeds not because we know things will be okay, but because we have faith in ourselves and the situation that things will be okay. I saw Cheryl next, and then Susan's back. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Um, Similar to what I was going to say is that when you plant a seed, you are looking to the future for when that seed is going to produce something. You know that it's not a right now thing. It's into the future that it's going to give you something.
Mm-hmm.
So something else I wanted to say was that this poem brought to mind Martin Luther King for me, because I actually have been reading some things about Martin Luther King recently, and so that what a different world we would have if he hadn't been killed when he was, and
Yeah.
Just the things that he could have done with his life, with what he was starting to do.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Cheryl. And it does show the power that one principled person can have, right? And the tragedy of losing Martin Luther King, and yet it shows us that there is also the possibility of people making a difference. So that's an act of hope as well. Let me say one thing about what Cheryl and Aviva said, and then I'll turn to the other people whose hands are up. This idea of planting a seed as an act of hope brings up a number of different Jewish metaphors. Bob put in the chat the seed of a carob tree. I hadn't even thought about that one, but that's that famous story about Honi Hama'agal, Honi the circle maker, who sees the old man planting a carob tree that he will never reap from, that is for his grandchildren, right? So that's one example of a story where planting a seed is an act of hope. And I also thought about this saying from Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who used to say, if you have a sapling in your hand and someone tells you the Messiah has arrived, first plant the sapling and then go out and welcome the Messiah. In other words, who knows what it means that the Messiah has arrived, but I do know that seedling in my hand has the ability to make the world a better place. So first we plant our seed, first we plant our sapling, and then we go see whether the Messianic age has actually begun. So let's turn to Susan and then David.
See how this.
No, Susan, hold on. You know what? Let's do this. I have an idea. I've just put one of you in the waiting room. Susan, can you speak now?
Yes.
All right, we gotcha.
Okay. Well, I arrived late because I was having technical difficulties and didn't see the whole poem, but now that I've seen it, the first thing that came to me was along the lines of what Cheryl said, Martin Luther King, but not only Martin Luther King, but Heschel, who walked with Martin Luther King, who said, you have to pray with your feet. And what they were doing was praying with their feet when they walked together. And this is all about action, however large or however small. They were resisting, but they were planting seeds also.
Nice. Yeah, that's beautiful. Heschel said, yeah, he was talking about the march in Selma, I think, where he said, I felt like I was praying with my feet. David, go ahead. David Robeson.
Thank you. I put in the chat about hope is not passive, reminding me of the Masada, which is, kind of a sad hope, but it still is inspirational for people throughout the following history. And then also Herzl's Zionism. He did not, unless I'm mistaken in my recent history, he did not live to see Israel's founding, but he planted that seed. And then it walks into a room where futures have been stolen. Really, that was one of the things that really resonated with me, because with our current administration and all the difficulties in Israel and Palestine, Gaza, it feels like the future is being stolen, and we still need to plant the seed of hope that both of our nations can be redeemed.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. And that may be what the author here means by hope as an act of resistance. What are we resisting? We are resisting, number one, you're resisting those who would oppress. And number two, I think you're resisting the despair that says things cannot be better, right? Hope is an act of resisting that despair, walking into a room where futures have been stolen and planting that seed anyway in a world where nobody feels like planting a seed. That's when you plant the seed. That's when hope comes along. And then where he goes next is to say that actually makes for powerful change, right? When we plant the seed anyway, what happens? Books that have forgotten our names in the book Gates, in the prayer book Gates of Prayer, there's a beautiful poem or reading that says, can a people be destroyed as long as a child remembers its parents, right? Memory is a really powerful act of world building in Judaism and in general. That's why we're supposed to remember all kinds of things in Judaism. Remember the day of Shabbat in order to make it holy. Remember what Amalek did to you. We're told to remember the victims of the Holocaust, right? There's so much world building that we do as Jews simply through the act of memory. Lighting the yahrzeit candle, reciting the Kaddish, remembering the ways that those who came before us made the world a better place, which actually is an act of hope as well. Aviva and Yehuda, go ahead.
But yet, when I hear people harking back to a time that never was, this idea of if only we could go back to and fill in the blank, that is a very scary concept to me, because it always feels like the act of, bettering the world lies in moving forward. It never lies in going back. Remembering, yes, but going back, it's not even nuanced. It's very scary when I hear anybody referring to a time that was. It scares me. The answer is always the past holds you up to move forward, and the idea of hope never lies in going backwards.
Yes, I think that I appreciate that distinction, right? Remembering the past and remembering that which has been passed down is not the same thing as going backwards. In fact, look what he writes here. This is all about body posture. Speaking of praying with your feet and what Heschel said, here our author gets into body posture. Hope stands when grief says sit. It rises when oppression says kneel. And what is it doing? It keeps marching when the road has been paved with disappointment. You only march forward, right? I suppose you could march backwards, but that's not what marching means, right? So hope is a forward march toward, not toward the past, but remembering the past and toward something better with the belief that we can create something better. Devora, please. Hope I'm pronouncing your name right.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. Well, I think that I agree. We should always be moving forward, but perhaps also when you hear people talk about going back to the way things were, there's a feeling or a sense of security or something that we want to recapture to bring into the future. Moving forward doesn't mean you have to leave everything from the past behind. You can bring the good things and
Yep.
put them into the future.
Yeah, I like that, right? Yes, absolutely. In fact, here, look at one more poem. We're almost out of time here, but this idea of hope marching made me think of this poem, which comes from the prayer book Mishkan Tefillah, which is the Reform prayer book, the current Reform prayer book, and it says as follows: "Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together." I think, and I don't remember who wrote this. I should have looked it up before we met, but I think it's a really beautiful statement of how we can have an eye to the past while marching forward. And hope in some ways is the fuel that helps us, that keeps us marching forward no matter where we are. It's interesting to think about the idea, and you can, in the minute we have left, I'd be curious if anybody has thoughts on this. Wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, right? That's an interesting idea. And what that really means is wherever we go, we're never supposed to be satisfied. We are supposed to believe at all times that there is a brokenness around us. Now, sometimes that's easier to see than others. I think right now we all agree there's a brokenness around us, right? But even when things are good, even during good times, it is eternally Egypt. We're never supposed to just sit back on our laurels and say, okay, we got here, we're in the promised land, because there is always work to do. There's always marching forward to be done. There are always ways that we need to do tikkun, that we need to repair the world. So we're out of time here, but I'll just end by reading the last two paragraphs again, because I think they're so powerful. He writes, "Hope is not for the untested, hope is for the bold. Hope is how we resist without becoming what we resist." And I would have liked to have spent an hour with you unpacking that, but I think it's a really important message for this particular moment that we're in. He says, hope is how we rise, how we rebuild, how we remember, how we are still here, that we are still here not by accident, but by audacity, because hope, true hope, will always be the beginning of freedom. The name of the author here is Dave Joseph Jr. You can find him on Substack. I'll put it in the chat, even though you can all see it on the screen. You can find him on Substack, among other places, and I hope that this little poem of hope, which, as I said before, is not a Jewish text, except in all the ways that it really is a Jewish text. I hope that we can find a little bit of audacity to be hopeful, even in a world that feels very, very broken right now. And remember that our job is to clasp hands and march together. So I'm glad that we can all be here to find some hope together. I'll wish you an early Shabbat Shalom, and I look forward to seeing all of you next week. Thanks, everyone.